they talk about white privilege or whatever. And I was like, I don't think white privilege is a thing, but I'll tell you what your privilege is. Your privilege is that you have two married parents who will remain married for the rest of their lives.
I'm just going to drive that point home. So I'm from Chicago, as we discussed right before we came on the show, and 80% of the minority population in Chicago in the inner city are born out of wedlock. They have no fathers in their lives. And it's amazing because we hear we need more money for education, more money for this, more money for that, white privilege, etc. But it's exactly what you said. They're fatherless boys. Prisons are filled with fatherless boys, fatherless men.
John Adams said it very poignantly. He said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And then George Washington, in his farewell address, said, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports."
Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host. You know, for all the young people that are joining us, especially part of our apostolate called Claymore, Militus Christi, you see the big Claymore sword behind me. That's our logo for that. And a lot of young guys, especially, and young girls too, but we're working mostly with young men and all the people that love them, I always like to say, including their girlfriends, etc. They're sensing something wrong, and they're stepping up to the plate. They're asking a lot of questions. The young people, and they've been really touched by the assassination of Charlie Kirk. They're starting to really understand the spiritual warfare that we're fighting. And I read a couple of recent articles, and I want to continue to pay tribute to Charlie Kirk. He touched all of us when he was assassinated, but you also see the vile contempt for him and coming on the other side. So we want to explore that a little bit. I have with me Carolyn McKinney. She's a Catholic wife, mother, and a business owner. Very excited to have her. She's the author of these articles I just referenced. One in Catholic Exchange, what I hope my sons will learn from the life of Charlie Kirk. And if we have time to get to it, or we'll weave it in. Another one for Crisis Magazine. Liberalism died with Charlie Kirk. Very, very important articles. And thank you, Carolyn. Great to have you with us today. And thanks for paying tribute to Charlie. Tell us a little bit about your impetus behind writing those articles.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack. I appreciate being here. My impetus for writing the articles was just really how I was struck by the assassination, and it really helped me to work out all my feelings on paper, really. And so I have 4 sons, and 3 of
How many
whom,
children altogether?
5.
Okay, so one
5
girl,
children.
huh?
Yeah,
Real quick, where does she fit in?
she's number 4.
Number 4. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
congratulations, Carolyn.
we're very overwhelmed, and the girls in this family are very overwhelmed, so it's her and I against the rest.
I'm the oldest of 5 boys. My poor mom, she still suffers with us, you know.
I have to say I am a boy mom, though. God made me to have sons, so
Yes, good.
I enjoy them so much. But, the my sons are young men, 20, 18, and 16.
That's our apostolate, just that
Yeah.
age. Gen Z kind of been a little older. We go up into the 30s, but
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, they're all Gen Z, and we're shepherding them into adulthood, and it's difficult right now
Very
for
difficult.
men, especially I mean, I think it's a little better for Catholic men because, we've affirmed them. If we've affirmed their masculinity, we've taught them, that it's natural and good for them to be protectors, and they need to be, servants of the weaker around them. And, their school teaches them chivalrous acts. And, we're in this community that really has not warped their sense of manhood like our greater culture has. But, you know, it's still a shock to them to get out into that greater culture and, to see how the people around them, the men around them are treated, or how they're treated by other people outside of our, Catholic bubble. And, they see the media, they saw plenty of Charlie Kirk videos, they know the politics of the age, they know all that. And I wanted them to have a good reaction to a tragedy. the assassination hit us all hard, and I was afraid that a lot of men who were attached to Charlie Kirk would just react in this
Mm.
anger, and I didn't want that to happen to my sons or to the other young men that I know.
Yeah, and I think, Carolyn, to your point, I don't think it has in general.
No.
When I'm talking to young men, that's why I showcase this in the introduction with the spiritual warfare. They're starting to understand that, the liberal, right, attacking Charlie Kirk is really not my enemy. My enemy is the enemy. Satan is the enemy. And it's you couldn't say that a decade ago. People would think you're off your
Off your
rocker, but now they see it. Now they see it. And so I think when we couch it that with that spiritual battle and say, this is really good versus evil, isn't it? And if we just promulgate evil and violence and hit violence with violence, everybody loses, don't we, Carolyn?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and this was written just 2 days, well, it was really the day after his assassination that I wrote it, and it ran 2 days later, and so there was still this kind of unknown factor of
Mm,
how the right is going to respond,
yeah.
and, I think that it was clear within a few days that the right was responding with prayer and going back to church, and, Charlie's
Yes.
memorial service basically being, a Protestant, worship service, all that, and even Erica Kirk publicly
Amazing.
forgiving her husband's killer, like,
Amazing.
to me, and I had hoped in the in the few days after, I was really hoping and praying that she was gonna do that because while it's so hard, I can't even imagine
No.
the spiritual reserves that it took to do that, but that is the most incredible testimony that I could think of in that moment. She really demonstrated what it is to be a Christian by extending forgiveness. We all say the Lord's Prayer, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." The Lord will forgive us in the same measure that we will forgive other people. And so, that forgiveness that we extend is so crucial, and it's not often that we are given opportunities to visibly show that in such a public way, and she was given this incredible opportunity that she was just able to be this witness that was amazing.
Yeah, that's well said. And I want to dig just a little bit more on that. When we understand the martyrs in the church, and how their blood, and Erica got that. Charlie's wife got that. She understood that there is going to be some good. God will take evil and turn it into good. But this takes a real reserve, doesn't it? This woman, I was amazed. I didn't know who she was really. Two small children, Carolyn, and you just go, oh my God, my heart. It's still right now when I'm speaking to you, my heart, and I've got so many feelings going on that my heart aches. I mean, I could actually shed a tear right now when I'm talking to you. I mean, that's how deeply when I look at his picture,
Yeah.
when I see him, speak in a video. I mean, it's very touching, isn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you again for taking the time to do that because I think this is a time to really see the contrast that when you understand again this word spiritual warfare, but we're going someplace, and that's
Yeah.
what I think Erica latched onto, don't you? That we're going someplace. This life has a meaning and purpose, and it's going to get over. And if all we do is just focus on this life, we're going to get there's going to be vitriol, and
Yeah.
we take justice in our own hands, and blah 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 blah.
Right. Right. I mean, we're no better than the pagans if we don't actually believe in, heaven after this world and act accordingly, right? And so, really the things that I talked about in this article to my sons was highlighting all the things that I wanted them to take away from Charlie Kirk's life, right? And the biggest one was just family, like there just there's not a lot of people getting married, there's not a lot of people having children, and Charlie and Erica have been such amazing ambassadors of like getting married young and having children and having as many children as you can. And, he had this incredible commitment to his family. And, you see so many video clips of him and his daughter or
Mm.
even his son, who is
Son,
even
yeah.
younger, and just how much he truly loved his kids and put them, put Erica and his kids as the first and foremost priority in his life. And so, it was undoubtedly true that right after God was his family in terms of importance. Like, he had his priorities in order, right?
Yeah, and what I think young people, I think that's a great point, and I think young people are starting to understand, at least the ones we're talking to now, but we have to proclaim this, that those are not two separate issues. The love of God and the love of your neighbor and the love, of course, of marriage and the family. These are linked, aren't they? First of all, I can't give what I don't have.
Mhm.
That's what we're seeing in this culture, right? So many children being born out of wedlock, so many people that don't have families. Sometimes when I'm speaking to young people, they didn't even have a family. They have no faith, but they sense something's wrong. So this is why your articles and what you're proclaiming here is so important, that they have to step into relationships. Part of our apostolate is to form communities and friendships and stuff that we can talk about these things. And for people that don't have families to join other men and women that will become their family, But
Yeah.
so these are linked, aren't they? This love of God. I can't give what I don't have, so I have to receive love and then become a person of love. Charlie understood that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he was really trying to turn around and reach those people who didn't have that family life, right? Like, for a lot of us Catholics, we're trying to conserve or preserve what we knew to be normal, 50 years
Yeah.
ago, 30 years ago,
Can you
right?
imagine that you're right? How much has this changed?
Yeah, I mean, so many don't know what a stable family actually is. And, I had my oldest son. He was dating this girl for a little bit, and it's just somebody that he met at work who was not a Christian. And he was at their home one time, and he came home just absolutely shocked. He's like, their mother doesn't cook dinner, they don't eat together, the house was disorderly, like, everything about their family. And she was on their 4th marriage, there was, like, met multiple stepkids in the same house. I mean, it was just a
Chaos.
disaster. And, he has such a big heart, and he's like, "Mom, can I just invite her to Sunday dinner so she knows what an ordered family life looks like?" And I was like, "Yes, that's fine, but, it's gonna take more than just a glance, a glimpse." We have a whole generation of kids that are that whose parents have not given them an example of stability. They have
Yeah.
not given them an example of a loving, sacrificial marriage relationship. There's no reserves for those people. Those kids are gonna have to go and find that information elsewhere, right? They're gonna have to go and adopt, mentors that can help them to get a vision of what an ordered family life looks like,
Wow, what you
just
said
like
is
what
so
you're saying.
important. Again, I don't want to overstate this, apostle, but that's exact. You just articulated perfectly why we started that,
Mhm.
to give them a foundation in the truth and love them in the truth and speak truth in love, bring them into a relationship, and that's what this is. It helps them. It helps me, say, disciple a young guy or a young person, that it could be a woman too, but we do focus on young men. But what we're finding with those young men, Carolyn, and you addressed this already, is they're dating. They think that bringing a woman, say, home to your house and sitting down for dinner, and that woman, they get it while they're sitting there, but they carry so much baggage.
Yes.
And you were starting to allude to that it's going to take more than me trying to be kind or loving to this woman, because if I do get into a relationship with her, if I do marry her, she's going to have to really come into a deep spiritual life. Otherwise, she won't get rid of this baggage, will she? She'll
Yeah.
carry it into our marriage. And God bless those marriages, because they can be chaotic. I know lots of them,
Yeah.
lots of them.
Well, and I think too, there's no replacement for modeling behavior, right? That's why we as parents, we model the best behavior to our children, right? And I mean, or that's what we're supposed to be doing. We'll put it that way. Years ago I started noticing, 8 to 10-year-olds dropping F-bombs on soccer fields and knowing that it's their parents that are, modeling bad behavior, right? We have a massive parenting problem in America, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah.
But there is no replacement for modeling behavior, right? And if you were raised without seeing modeled good behavior, you're going to need to seek out you have to be proactive to seek out that modeling now so that you can learn and understand what the good life actually is.
Mm,
And so, I think that a lot of these kids just have a really kind of rough road of relearning their behaviors, and that takes determination and
it
courage
does. Yeah.
and resolve.
We're going to ask you to join us by helping us get the word out. So if you could make sure you subscribe and then hit like, no matter which platform you're on. Remember that the Become Who You Are podcast is on audio, on any music or podcast app. We're up on Rumble, YouTube. You can find us on X. When you do subscribe, hit the like button. Couple things to share with people. Love Ed. Love Ed is just such an important apostolate. So it's within our apostolate, the John Paul II Renewal Center. This helps parents give the talk to their children. We're trying to push back on all these gender ideologies and the porn culture, and give children the truth and do it through their parents, and we help them do that. The other one is really taken off too. It's Claymore Militus Christi, Soldiers for Christ. That's where you see the sword behind me. That's the big sword. That's our logo for Claymore. That's a Claymore sword. And this is for young people, especially young men, Gen Z, high school, all the way through. Let's call it till they're 30 years old or so. They're starting to really understand that something nefarious, sounds very toxic, is going on in the culture. And so they're stepping into the church, and we're discipling them. So we want to help get the word out about those things. And lastly, consider financially supporting us. Everything's in the show notes. Hey, God bless you. Thanks again.
You have to kind of leave your life behind, like how you were raised, and embrace this entirely new paradigm. And so it's much more than, like you said, taking her home for family dinner.
Well,
It's
Kara,
it's an actual conversion
you
in
can,
culture.
yeah, and you can see how the culture takes their time. Like what
Mhm.
you just said, metanoia, right? I have to turn. We all stand in a sense before that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And instead of turning away, I have to turn into to God. But so much noise, so much confusion. And what we're talking about here is going back and laying a base, right?
Yeah,
You're actually not going back to lay a base. You're modeling, and then
right.
you're taking that on yourself. But there's so much noise. They have to get away from the porn. They got to get away from the phones. They got to get away from all this social media noise that they have. They might have to form new friendships. So you're right. But I think despite all that, that's what Charlie was doing.
Yeah.
He was waking those people up, and they were moving. Carolyn, do your boys, like you said, they're fairly young? Give us the age again. You said 16, and the older ones
My
from there.
oldest is 20, 18,
Okay,
16. Yeah.
so when they meet people outside or friends outside, what kind of conversations are they having with those guys? I mean, do they have a sense that, because if we don't get this turned around, it's their future, right? I have 8 grandchildren too, and I look at those, and 6 of them are girls, and they're starting to date the older ones, and I know that each one of even if they really date some respectful guy, they have been exposed to things like hardcore porn and all these ideas, and they have to be very strong themselves in order to maybe model what true love really is to a young guy who wants true love but doesn't know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a kind of sad reality that we're in right now. But I will say that my kids, until they graduate high school, they don't get a lot of external, one-on-one time with others, like maybe on the soccer field, and they hear language, but
Yeah.
there's not there's not a lot of deep conversations happening with non-Christians, we'll put it that way. But now I will say that, my oldest worked on a landscaping crew one summer when he was in high school. That was an eye-opening experience for him too, because just the lives of the men on that crew were just in such disarray, and they all had some sort of addiction. It was a mess. And so, he got some exposure to the world that my others quite haven't had yet. And I think his overall response has been just gratitude because he recognizes what he has been given. And I used to tell him, well, I still tell my kids, they talk about white privilege or whatever, and I was like, I don't think white privilege is a thing, but I'll tell you what your privilege is. Your privilege is that you have two married parents who will remain married for the rest of their lives. I was like, that gives you an edge over your peers in almost every category, and nobody will talk about it, but that's the truth. And,
It
we're
is the
here for
truth.
you. We're your foundation, and that's going to make the difference in your life. And so,
I'm just going to drive that point home. So I'm from Chicago, as we discussed right before we came on the show, and 80% of the minority population in Chicago in the inner city are born out of wedlock. They have no fathers in their lives. And it's amazing because we hear we need more money for education, more money for this, more money for that, white privilege, etc. But it's exactly what you said. They're fatherless boys. Prisons are filled with fatherless boys, fatherless men. And so you're exactly right. And so I think we have to keep talking about this because as much as the evil one doesn't want us to do that, look at this is anti-human what's happening in our culture, right? The destruction of the child in the womb, the gender ideologies, etc. Well, what's the solution? The solution is what you just described. Let's not make it overly complicated. Put a father and a mother in a home, hopefully informed by some faith,
mm,
right? Otherwise they're going to run
harder to
out
stay
of,
together. Yes.
yeah, and so they're going to get attacked too. But you're right, and so this is all reminding us what, Carolyn, to get back to what Charlie talked about, which is a foundation. And I want to talk a little bit about because now we have a socialist slash communist potential mayor in New York City, which is not really so far from you. I mean, you got to be feeling it more than we do even in Chicago, even though we have the same thing in Chicago.
Yeah.
But people are looking for solutions and they go, and I think this is where your second article in Crisis Magazine was so good. Liberalism died with Charlie Kirk. And I like to go there just a little bit for our audience because, sometimes we think this is left or right. It's either socialism, communism, or it's free market capitalism. And these young people are growing up and what they're being told is free market capitalism is against you. And the only thing that's going to support you is Big Daddy State. Well, if I don't have a father or an unstable home, I may look at Big Daddy State and say, well, I don't care. I need something and I'll grab for that. But those aren't the two options really. Liberalism, strict liberalism, right? Is kind of you're defining as free market, right? And
Well,
free markets and stuff too. But
yeah, the liberalism in the classical sense, as in the philosophical sense, not
yes,
not the way that Rush Limbaugh described Democrats, right?
yeah. So let's define that for our audience the way you're talking about it here, because it's gonna I think it's gonna be important to a point I want to make.
Yeah, sure. So, there's I reference in my article this article by Professor Patrick Deneen,
Yes,
who
excellent.
is a professor at, I believe he's still at Notre Dame. He was at Georgetown before that. And
Are they still Catholic universities? Those I don't want to. I don't want to. I
yeah,
shouldn't go
I
there.
don't know.
I don't know.
There are Catholics at those
Yes,
universities.
there
We'll
sure
put that
are.
we'll
There
put it
sure
that
are.
way.
Yes.
And he wrote an article back in 2012. I'm dating myself, but it really rocked my world. I'm at that point in time, I'm a mom with like 4 little kids, and
Mm,
I'm still keeping my mind fresh by reading First Things and,
yeah.
Crisis Magazine and all these places. And he wrote this article called Unsustainable Liberalism. And he actually talks about how there was this revolution. Liberalism was this revolution in thought, but it's not exactly what we think it is. So we associate liberalism with free markets, individual rights, that kind of thing, right? Private property. Those things pre-existed liberalism, he points out. Those were present in like late medieval thought before the Enlightenment. But the big revolution in liberalism was that, first of all, base of politics is now resting upon the idea of voluntarism. Okay. So and he defines that as the free, unfettered, and autonomous choice of individuals. And you can see you can see the outer workings of that when you look at Locke, who talks about the social contract and individuals choosing their destiny, right?
And I want to stop you there just because that's the point I wanted to make for our younger audience, that they don't think of it as liberals,
Right.
like we're talking about here, right? These liberals that are socialists and this is not what we're talking about here.
Exactly. Really, for all of American history, really, Americans have been liberal. Americans of every stripe have been liberal. Okay. And that's because we have this like large commitment to individual liberty, and specifically this idea of voluntarism, where we come together as a community to create our government, and we need to maximize our individual choices. But in the past 20 to 30 years, there's been this rise of the illiberal left. Okay, it's this segment of the left that is no longer committed to liberal ideas. And so they don't actually have this commitment to freedom. They have this commitment to a certain outcome, often authoritarian or totalitarian. And so, my article is basically saying that, liberalism, as Patrick Deneen said, liberalism itself is unsustainable. And he talks about how this voluntarist logic ultimately affects all relationships, and it breaks down the family, it breaks down communities. We're really at the end of what he believes is the end of life for liberalism. And what comes after liberalism, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that he's entirely sure. He did write a book about it, which I haven't read. But he kind of was a canary in a coal mine talking about how our current situation is really the end stage of this unsustainable liberalism. And so we're now, we have this segment, which is an alarmingly large segment, seemingly, of the left now, that is illiberal already. And it was really the right that was upholding these liberal values, trying to conserve what we have had in our country for, many generations now. But when Charlie Kirk was assassinated for carrying out liberal actions, which is free speech and, articulating arguments and trying to convince others to his side, right? When he was killed for carrying out liberal activities, I think the right is starting to wake up and think, why are we still upholding these things? Why are we still playing this game when the other side isn't? Now, does that mean that a big section of the right is going to be a liberal, or abandon individual rights, or, embrace authoritarianism? I don't think that's the case. But, one of the things that I'd said in my article was that one of the main hallmarks, one of the main outer workings in my lifetime of this end stage liberalism, has been this incredible insistence that we are tolerant of everything at all times, right? You must be tolerant of this girl who thinks he's a boy or she's a boy, and not only must you tolerate it, you must go along with this charade, right? You must tolerate, this person walking in a pride parade in your community. You must tolerate,
Drag story or drag story hour,
yeah,
right? And
exactly.
we speak in the public school systems here about the pornography they're showing kids. They have an LGBTQ cover on it, but
Mm-hmm.
really what they describe inside is pornography. And what we see is that the mass effect of this is they're stealing the innocence of children, right? And
Absolutely.
so this is devastating. What we're talking about here is devastating. And what I think I got really out of it from a practical aspect, and I'll throw this back at you. So how did these young people that we're working with, how did they pick this up and understand this? Charlie was trying to be tolerant of everybody, right? And we need to love everybody. We're called to love them, and I think that's why he was so civil. Everybody said, "How could he argue with these people or talk to them?" And he didn't lose his temper very often. Tucker Carlson just talked about that. He kept losing his temper, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm here to speak, because Charlie's not here, and I keep losing my temper. How did he do that?" Well, I think he looked at them and he understood that the enemy is the enemy. That this is really a spiritual battle, and these people that he's trying to talk to have been so malformed by the culture, by their families, that you can't really reason with them. So what happens? You're trying to use reason to bring out the truth, but when people are atheists, or even if they didn't choose it, right? I have no God, I have no formation. Your reason has become very unreasonable, and it's our reason that wants to seek the truth. So if my reason is not working well,
Clouding.
I'm
Yeah.
not looking for the truth.
Right.
So I don't want to listen to your story. And so if you come out and you're telling me a story that I don't like, I'm going to assassinate you. And let me ask you this. So we go again, we've got the socialist, communist mayor, and people say, well, I guess I shouldn't vote for a communist socialist, right? But should we just embrace liberalism? And you say neither one of those is going to work ultimately. It's unsustainable on either side because we have to be formed
Yeah.
underneath that. So here's the third option that we actually take in, let's call it Jesus Christ, huh? This is a Catholic Christian show, and say, we have to be formed by the truth. God gave us reason, intellect, and free will. And so I have to seek the truth, and then I'm free to choose, hopefully, the good. This is what our decision is. What is good, right? What is good for the person that I see? In other words, if you kill babies, if you don't care about marriage and the family, is that good for us? Is that good for society? So we have to go back to your earlier points. What is good for a person to grow up? They need a family. First, they need life, and then they need a family, and they have to be formed. It's our founding fathers that you mentioned in the article said we have to be a moral and religious people, John Adams said. And that's what we lost. We took liberalism, we took God out, faith out, the virtues out, the values out, and now we all just become greedy people trying to grab what we can, and there you
Yeah.
go.
We're about to see that with EBT running out soon. But I would say that, most people in our country now don't realize the foundation that they were given and how far we are from that foundation.
It's a great point you made, yeah.
You brought up the John Adams quote, and George Washington said the same thing in his farewell address, that
Do you have that quote in front of you? I may have it if you don't. Do you have it? Let's bring that quote out, will you? Because
yeah,
this is important. This is George Washington, our first president.
John Adams said it very poignantly. He said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And then George Washington, in his farewell address, said, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports." So, to our founders, virtue was if essential to the functioning of our republic. And
Yeah.
even here in New Hampshire, our Constitution still says that the legislature should cherish education in the virtues, and it lists some virtues specifically. Like the whole purpose of compulsory education, at least in New Hampshire, was to rear the next generation in the virtues. It had nothing to do with reading, writing, arithmetic,
Isn't
although
that
they did
wild?
do those things. But the end of education was to educate a virtuous citizenry, right? And we have come so far. It's
We've thrown it out.
180 from that, in fact.
Yeah.
They are grooming them into sexual sin, and socializing them into terrible, vicious behavior. So, yeah, I think most people don't realize kind of how far we've fallen on that. But, one of the things that I said in my article, I'm not a big government solution type of gal, and I don't think the solutions to our problems are really necessarily a government solution. Like there are some, of course, because the size of government makes it impossible to do a lot of things. But in terms of really fixing our problems, it's having to fix the culture. And that takes our hard work, right? It takes us following Jordan Peterson's advice and making our own bed and, really helping the people around us to see the vision of the good, the true, and the beautiful, and to order their lives to God. This is our Christian moment. We need to re-evangelize our culture if we have any hope of saving it, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's just a great point as we start to wind down here is that, Plato, was in the ancient Greeks understood this, that, this eros, this great desire even to love and be loved was also connected with everything that's true, good, and beautiful, especially the beauty of love. If we don't get back to that, and so this even goes further, I have to get my heart back. At the very basis, Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag for 8 years, and he sees all the atrocities in there, but not just perpetrated on the people that were being held there, but even amongst themselves. And even though a guard could be nice, could be kind, even in the midst of this terror, and other ones can just be, just murderous, right? And taking advantage of people, et cetera, et cetera. And he said at the end of the day, he understood that every single individual human heart had a battle between good and evil. So we have to get our hearts back. We have to understand what the beauty of marriage and the family is. I mean, it's the basic building block of every civilization. Take that out, there's nothing else that's going to replace it. It's impossible. So
Yep.
if we always get back to that, keep life, right?
Yeah.
This is in our Declaration of Independence, that
First
life,
one.
liberty,
Yeah.
right, and the pursuit of happiness, and they were almost putting property in there and decided not to at the last second. But anyways, you have to have life. So we got to support life. We got to support marriage and the family. There's nothing out there. There's no institution that can replace that, Carolyn. And then we have to be well formed, with our virtues and values. And where do we get those from? I think your article was so good in the name of Patrick Deneen's article, Unsustainable Liberalism, where you said, we took it for granted and then it went away. And that's where we're at.
Yeah.
But the young generation needs to hear what you're saying, because we have to put that back. We have to recapture those to move forward. It's like a parent would say to me, Jack, I'm just going to allow my kid to make their own value judgments. I said, your kid is 7 years old.
Right.
He doesn't have to go to church because he's going to create. I said, did you feel that you were qualified to create your own value system at 7 years old? I said, no, dude, you have to help them and tell. It's like the 10 Commandments. God gives you those and says, hey, here's your guidelines. At the end, I want a connection, an intimacy with you. But in the meantime, if you're not sure, don't kill anybody. Don't lie.
Right.
Don't steal, and honor
Yeah.
your mom and dad, right? And these are all
Right.
good things. We have to get that back, don't we, Carolyn?
That's the parenting problem I'm talking about, by the
Yes,
way.
it is. Yes, it is.
Parents are, the Bible says, and a lot of people will quote this, spare the rod, spoil the child, right? Now, I'm not one for corporal punishment, but the idea is that if you don't discipline your child, he or she will become, something that you won't like ultimately, and something that will ultimately not be good for society. And I think this also ties into fatherless homes. The reason so many boys, grow up into prisons when they're fatherless is because they were not given the authority figure in the home. And I think that even impacts our relationship with God. If you don't have a father in your home,
100%.
how do you relate to God the Father in heaven, right? And I
And,
think
and just keep that thought. But this is why we have to have patience with young people. This is
Yeah.
why Charlie, part of the reason he had patience, because he realized that if, to your point, I'm going to just reiterate what you said because it's an important point, that if you don't have a dad, or if your dad was an alcoholic or right, or somebody that wasn't close, this is what God the Father is like.
right.
So we have to overcome that. So we have to have patience, don't we, Carol,
Yeah.
with the people
And
we meet.
and honestly, this attack on the family is an attack on God and
100%.
his authority and his created order, like this decades of smash the patriarchy. God is the patriarchy, people.
Yeah. And we
We
have to
can't.
realize that God is a loving, merciful Father.
Yes.
He's a
Yep.
Charlie Kirk type father. Charlie Kirk took that grace, didn't he? And
Yes.
he lived that out, like you said,
Yep.
holding hands. I still got this image in my mind with this little 1-year-old boy, and then picking up his daughter with the other hand. And he just go, oh man, this is what our Father in heaven does.
Yes.
He's there for you in prayer. Open up your hearts in prayer. Open up to him. he wants to encounter you, and that father wants to encounter you. So we just have to get people there. Carolyn, you're such a gift. Thank you so much. I'm going to link your articles in the show notes. Can you reach out to us anytime you write another article? I want to sustain these kind of conversations because they're very important right now to young people. Their eyes are open. We can't let this die because we owe it to young people to help them as much as we can to have a love for our country, for our culture, for families, etc. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, if we don't give them the alternative, or if we don't give them a vision, the alternative is going to be something that's much worse for us.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the good ones are going to just get caught up, right? If you have too many young people off the rails, people grab power, and
Yeah.
before you know it, we're totalitarians.
Yes.
We're tyrants, aren't we?
Yeah.
Hey, God bless you, Carolyn. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk to you again soon.